Hey everyone, my name is Paul, and in this video I'm replacing the oil pan gasket in my RAV4. The coolest thing about the oil pan gasket in this car is, well, it doesn't have one. You just use this silicone sealer on the oil pan. This little tube costs about $8. You still have to change the oil, which runs about $30, and that makes this one of the cheapest repairs you can do. Let's take a look under my RAV4. Here you can see it has multiple oil leaks and I have to keep cardboard under the engine so I don't ruin my garage floor. I'll need to warm up the engine to make the oil drain better. I let it idle for 5 minutes. I always use a wooden block with my jack so I don't bend the soft metal unibody. I set the jack stands on the subframe by the control arms. You can hit the wrench with a hammer to loosen the drain plug. Let's drain that oil out. It looks a little weird. My RAV4 is way too shitty to drive, so I bought a newer car. This oil only has 350 miles on it, and it looks like chocolate milk. I'm expecting my oil to look new. If it had more miles, it should be black. This oil definitely has something wrong with it. You can send your oil to Blackstone Labs and they will test it for you. I'm going to request a free test kit. They'll send me a bottle for my oil, and the test only costs $30. Now let's get that oil pan off. It has 17 bolts and 2 nuts holding it on. I used a U-joint wobble socket adapter for the hard-to-reach bolts. Now just pry the oil pan a little, but don't bend it, and it won't come out while the exhaust is still on. Spoiler alert, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just learning as I go. Use a razor blade to clean the old sealer from the engine block. This oil looks so gross. There's a little bit of sludge at the bottom too. Yum. I'll start cleaning the pan with brake parts cleaner, then maybe the Goo Gone will help me with the outside. A brass wire wheel makes cleaning the sealant off the pan very easy. That's better already. This oil pan is very ugly, like most of my matches on Tinder. Since I named these videos RAV4 Restore, I guess I have to restore this oil pan. I already had this high temp engine paint in my garage in red, so that's what I'm using. A bright red oil pan will help me find the million other leaks in my car. This is the silicone I'm using. You can get it at any auto parts store. I've never actually read the instructions on one of these. Since this is a tutorial video, we will follow the directions. Okay, I'll smear the silicone evenly on the pan, going around all the bolt holes. I wiped the sealing surface on the engine with alcohol to make sure it's perfectly clean and the oil pan can go back in. Notice I removed the exhaust pipe. You're supposed to remove the exhaust pipe when you work on the oil pan. Now just install all the nuts and bolts and make them finger tight. I used a screwdriver with a 10mm socket. Finger tight, that means 1 Newton-meter of torque or less. Wait 1 hour for the silicone to dry a bit. The silicone is thicker now, so it won't just squeeze into the middle of the engine. I used a 10mm socket with a 6-inch extension to tighten most of the bolts. I used a shallow socket with U-joint adapter for the 4 hard-to-reach bolts closer to the transmission. The oil pan bolts need to be torqued to 5.4 Newton-meters. I'm just using a regular ratchet, but I'm actually a cyborg, so I have a torque wrench built into my hand. Now the exhaust pipe can go back in. You should always replace the gaskets because they get crushed during installation and they will leak if you use the old ones. I picked these up at AutoZone. The Moly gasket is a little thicker than the Fel-Pro, but they're the same part number. You can use either one. You should allow 24 hours for the silicone sealer to dry before you add oil and run the engine. I've never done this before, but today we're following the directions. This cap-style oil filter wrench is pretty awesome. You should get one. The part number for the oil filter is PH4967. Apply oil to the seal so it doesn't tear during installation. I'm moving the throttle cable out of the way to make it easier to fill the oil. The cap says 5W30, so that's what I'll use. You can use different viscosity oil based on the conditions where you drive your car. A higher viscosity oil is better in a hot climate. Fill with 4.5 quarts, then run the engine for 30 seconds. Wipe off the dipstick and put it back in. You want the level to be somewhere in the middle. On these old RAV4s, it's okay to just go to the full mark. It's gonna leak it all out anyway. Well, the oil pan is done, but I have some bad news for you. Well, bad news for me, but good news for you. While I was waiting for the oil pan paint to dry, I had a drip pan underneath the car and I caught some oil and some green coolant. And when I looked up underneath the engine, I saw coolant running down the inside of the block where the oil is supposed to be. Now I'm still waiting for the test kit from Blackstone Labs, but I already know what they're going to say. It's not going to be good. This is the oil I plan on sending into them, and the top ½ inch of this oil has separated from the rest. That is not good. Well, the good news is I'll be making a cylinder head replacement video as well as a timing belt video in the near future. Hooray!